Hello, I'm Voiding, and I'm back with the next episode of Flying Machines Basic Series. And I have a lot of, a lot of really useful stuff in front of me. A lot of really useful stuff that you can use in your builds. A lot of really useful circuits. So a lot of this can be like used for logic and stuff. So you can make your flying machines a little bit smarter. But first I'm gonna start with a few engines that I wish I covered in the last video. For example, diagonal flying machines. These are pretty cool. I'll be honest with you. These are fantastic things. So they're pretty cool. And also, I covered self-returning engines in the last video, and I have a few more. Or actually, these are all pretty much the same design, and it's way more compact. So I wish I knew this when I made that video, but here they are. They all self-return. As you can see. So, it uses the redstone lamp, because redstone lamps have some cool pulse extending properties. So if I do this, you'll see that the pulse is like really extended. So if I make this like even longer, it's like, yeah, you see what I mean. So it's using that mechanic to reverse the direction. When the lamp turns off, it updates the observer a second time. So that's how that works. Next, I'm gonna go over some double piston extenders. So first of all, I'm gonna go over these. So these ones work basically by pulsing this sticky piston, then pulsing both of them, but however, when you pulse both of them, you know, this one extends and this one extends, and this one will pull, like, the block back or push it forward or whatever it's doing, and it will stay put, so it'll stay in this position, so you have to pulse this one 3 times, and that's why there's 3 observers, so you can pulse this 3 times, and there's 2 observers here, so that, to give it enough to give this observer enough, to pulse it twice, actually, so that it can power this piston once it's in that position. And it's the same idea here, so as you can see, it can, push blocks when they are 2 blocks away, as you can see, and, it can also pull them, 1 block back if it's 3 blocks away. Another use of these double piston extenders, and these ones are a little bit different because they don't retract the blocks, so they have to be used differently. You have to move them once every 2 blocks because they move forward 2 blocks. Yeah. So, basically, what's happening here is this gets pushed into position. This piston is both of these pistons, the redstone block will be right here, and the slime will be right here. So this piston, both of these pistons actually will be quasi-powered by this redstone block. This, piston will push first, and then it will, drag this piston along with it, because it's stuck to the slime still. And then this piston will update, and it's still quasi-powered, so it'll, push the redstone, or it'll push the segment forward again. And here I have some little rails on the feet, so, and a bunch of rails, and I'm showing you this because this is pretty useful for stuff like rail curvers, where basically you have a line of rails up already placed, and then you have, this thing that's just flying forward, and it will curve the rails for you, as you can see here. And curved rails like this in this pattern are used for stuff like piston bolts, which are a fast way of traveling, where you can also be AFK, so I think Elytra can be faster, but you have to sit at your computer and click your mouse to fire rockets and stay and keep flying. With piston bolts, you can get in the piston bolt and then you can go AFK for a few minutes until you arrive at your destination. So this is basically makes the curved rails for piston bolts. So next, what I want to cover is canceling observer pulses. So I'll get into a little bit of detail on how observers work. Observers pulse for 2 game ticks, you already knew that, but they also have a cooldown of 2 game ticks. So, these 2 are pulsing, and basically, they're updating each other. So this one pulses, and this one pulses, and this one pulses. The reason why they don't fire in unison is because they have a cooldown. So this observer fires, and then this one observer fires while this one is still on cooldown. Then it fires again. Then this one's on its cooldown phase. So that's why they alternate like that. And basically, if you update an observer and then push it really quickly, you can... it'll basically be in its cooldown phase by the time it finishes moving, and it won't power this piston here. So... here's one way of doing it. The redstone block powers the fence gate, and the sticky piston pushes it forward. And it has to be a sticky piston, because if it's a regular piston, it won't work. Sticky pistons have some really strange differences from regular pistons. For example, you can use them to zero tick. Like if you placed a button on the side of a sticky piston, it will push the block out instantly. That's what a zero tick is. I explained it in the last video, I believe. You can also use them to push forward water sources, waterlogged blocks, as I also showed in the previous video. And again, here, sticky pistons have to be used even though they're not pulling anything. So, anyways, that's how that works. You see that piston did not push forward its block, and this is another way of doing it, using sticky piston in a wall. But this one's easier to update, in my opinion, because you can just, like, flick it manually or have an observer that does it. But when you move it forward, it doesn't push the block forward. So, I think that's a pretty useful circuit. I've actually used it once. So, you know, in very specific circumstances, you might need this. Next, I'm going to cover, double pulsing. So, double pulsing is when you have an observer pulsing a piston, and then have another observer observing that piston. And basically what that'll do is, it will pretty much, this observer will detect the piston extending and retracting, so it'll pulse twice. So you'll see that this observer will flash twice when I activate this. Okay, there it did. The first time it did, and I think my frame rate was just low. But yeah, it does that every time. So this is a pretty good way of updating bud wires, and it has other uses, which I'll show in a little bit, but I actually have it updating a bud wire over there. So, these things, of course, are movable. Over here we have one, that's getting pushed forward, so, if I... Actually, that's not the right one, it's, if I power this one like this, as you can see, it double pulses that sticky piston. And you can actually use these in like series. So or you can use like them to chain each other together. So if I have another one, I can use that as well. So I can use that to power I can use a double pulse to power the double pulse, as you can see there. So that's kind of what this is best for. So then you can move it forward by just like pulsing this piston here. This is another semi-automatic engine. So yeah, pretty good stuff. And this is also another one, but this time it pulls back. So, and for example, you can use this to power like a flying machine or something. So, yeah, if I have this, and I pulse this, it'll extend and then retract, and it'll pulse the sticky piston, and it'll cause the engine to start flying. As you can see here, and then we have a return station, a single block return station, just a piston. We covered that in the first episode. Then an extended piston, and I believe I covered moving extended pistons, but I'm not sure, so in case I didn't, it moves the redstone block out of the way, so the piston gets to retract, and then the piston is moved back into position, and then it extends again because it's next to the redstone block, as you can see there. So, that's what this is going to do when I push this. It pulls that forward, and it also activates this, so, that's cool. So... Yep. Then, I'm gonna move on to, another use of the double pulsing piston, and that's, to make an on and off switch. So basically, let's put it in on position. I can just pulse this observer, and basically, imagine that this is activating something, and then, eventually, like a flying machine or something comes back and activates this observer. So, actually, I can make that. I can just make that. Yep. I'm just gonna make it. Give me a second while I move this stuff temporarily. I can just have, kind of like this. If I have a piston like this, actually, yeah, a return station like that. I'm just gonna place an obsidian. You could place a extended piston. And then I can place another piston like this, which will extend and update this observer. If I do it like that, it will power this piston. So, if I activate this, it'll start this flying machine, it'll fly, and then return back, and then... So basically, this flying machine is just on a loop, and it's flying back and forth, and it's... but if I wanted to stop this, this is how I would do it. I can just move this redstone block over here, and this piston, this downwards facing sticky piston, would extend this observer down. And then, since it's extended, this piston won't be able to push. So, as you can see here, that observer pulsed, but this piston didn't get to push. And when I turn it back on, the observer will quasi-power the piston, and it'll turn the thing back on. So, you don't have to just use a flying machine here. You could have a bunch more stuff going on. Like, you know, and everything... It does something like, I don't know, break bedrock or something, or like, maybe it's a quarry. And basically every time you want to turn it on, you just do this, and just everything happens, and then it will... If you leave it on, it will keep doing what it's doing. It'll keep moving forward and stuff, or whatever it's doing. And if you want to turn it off, you can just do that anytime. So this is a really useful circuit. Anyways, it's getting a little bit close to what I have over here. So I'm going to just show this. So what I have over here, again, using a sticky piston and a redstone block, it's pretty useful. You can just, like, power and unpower pistons, and that can do a multitude of things. Not just, you know, using this double pulse as a on and off switch, but you can also turn on, an observer clock. So, basically this observer clock is powering this piston here, and, it is creating a loop. Observers are observing each other, and this observer is observing this, piston head, and this one's powering this piston. So now, if I turn that off and add an observer here, after this piston, it'll double pulse this sticky piston. As I mentioned earlier, it'll power, you can use it to power a bud wire, And this is where the next circuit actually comes in. So if I turn this on, you notice what happens is that this observer gets shifted back and forth every time, and so every other time this piston is fired. So one time it's fired, it doesn't pulse, and the other time it does. And all of these are actually alternated, so basically the outer two fire and then the inner one fires. So that's a pretty good way of alternating stuff, like for example, like a TNT system on a quarry. So if you time it wrong, you can actually cause the block to spit out there. So be careful with it. Make sure you have the right timing. And again, this circuit here, where this observer is getting shifted back and forth, you can use this for something for, say, this machine, which I built in 5 seconds, and it basically just will pull every other block up. And the reason it's doing that is because it uses this circuit. This observer is getting shifted back and forth every time it moves forward. So it moves forward once, this sticky piston will fire, and it moves forward another time, and it won't fire. And it'll basically alternate. The catch with this is that you have to have a slower engine if you're moving it forward every time. Because this adds this, like, this piston extending and retracting. If you just use a regular 10-game tick engine, it will crash. So you actually need to use a slower engine. So this is the engine. It's 2 sticky pistons and 1 regular piston. So as you can see, this is just getting shifted like that. And it's creating that pattern like that. So that's a pretty good use of that. Next, a pretty simple one is we have a pretty basic movable rail line. So if I power this right here, and I have like say something like that. Yeah, I'm just gonna YOLO that, and if I do that, it will move forward with this rail line once. So it's a pretty basic way of doing that. So, and the cool part about this is you can put like a detector rail right here, and it'll, if your minecart goes over, it'll activate the sticky piston, and it'll move forward a few seconds after the minecart is has moved off of the movable rails. So if I push this minecart forward, as you can see, it moved forward once. So it's a pretty cool circuit. It's used in like railway bedrock breakers and like block placers, like piston. Like you have a bot moving around and it's placing pistons or slabs for bedrock breakers or whatnot. And last but not least, we have a movable conveyor. So basically this will shift blocks around in a loop as it moves forward. So as I move it forward, what will happen is this will kind of shift, it'll rotate clockwise from where I'm looking, as you can see there. So every time it moves forward, it shifts the blocks like that. This is a pretty basic circuit. And here I'm using it to, as an example of how useful this can be. If you wanted to have a flying machine that does a certain thing, for example, for simplicity's sake, I just have this lamp here, and I want to power the lamp every 4 times I move this machine forward. I can just have a conveyor of 8 blocks, and 2 of them on opposite ends are observers. So that means every time this gets pushed forward, this conveyor will cycle, and it'll pulse the lamp every 4 times it moves forward. So, just gonna start this engine. Again, you have to use a slower engine because this conveyor is kind of a bottleneck, And if you use a 10 game tick engine, you can't get it to be you can't get it to be that fast without breaking it. But as you can see, it pulses 1, 2, 3, every 4 times it moves forward, as I said. So that's the power of conveyors, and this kind of stuff is like really useful for like if you're like making a machine that automatically makes a water stream for quarries or something, like a water source every 8 blocks. Then this is a pretty good way of doing it by using a conveyor. Like you could have like an observer, every 1 observer in this 8 block section, and it will power something, and like a water source will be placed using the movable water techniques I explained in the previous video. And you can stop it like that, and you can just turn it back on again. So it's a pretty useful circuit, if you ask me. But just like I'm gonna stop this flying machine, I'm going to put this video to a stop as well. And basically, yeah, this kind of stuff is stuff that you would use for logic in a one-way flying machine. So it's some pretty useful stuff. So now that you know all of this, you can use these circuits in your own flying machines to make them a little bit more complicated, a little bit more, you know, they can do a lot more than what you could before with just engines and extensions. Because the previous videos were about stuff that makes flying machines move. So that stuff was just baby bones stuff. So now that you know how to make flying machines move, now I figured it was about time that I start showing you guys some actually useful stuff that you can put in your flying machines to make them do super cool things. So, and I'm thinking next video I'm gonna cover update order, slime update order. And that's really useful, really important skill to understand slime update order, because it will save you a lot of trouble, and it will make things a lot less confusing. Because as it stands, there's a lot of stuff, you know, in Slimestone that if you don't know how the update order works, it's really, really confusing. For example, TNT dupers. TNT dupers are pretty confusing, because they use a lot of update order. For example, if I have this, so this TNT duper, when I push it forward, it doesn't dupe. When I pull it back, it does dupe. Why is it only dupe when pulled back? You may be asking. And if I move the piston over here, why does it just break? You know, this is really confusing stuff. And it broke the rail. No, it duped the rail. Okay, cool. Hi, hello there, Ray here, and today I discovered rail duping. We were testing with some viewers on stream, and this is just something I discovered. I'm kidding, of course. This has been known. But yeah, rail. I just duped a rail accidentally. I didn't even mean to dupe the rail, but there you go. I made a rail duper. Anyway, that's about it for this episode of Slimestone Basics. I hope you learned a lot, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. See ya.